G'day guys and welcome back to another One Piece deck profile. Today we're checking out our good friend Zephyr, Zed, the man with the purple hair, the most purple hair you'll ever see. And this is probably one of the most control-y decks that you can currently play in One Piece. Purple, black, both have crazy removal at their disposal, and so this makes, definitely super control-y deck. If you like that kind of control-y playstyle, this is going to be the deck for you. Let's start out by checking out Zephyr himself. 5,000 power, 4 life, which is very typical for your dual colored leaders, purple black. As I mentioned, lots of removal, lots of ball control that we can get with both purple and black. The leader effect plays right into that playstyle as well. When attacking, Don -4, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. Then this leader gains 1,000 power during this turn. So, removal and a buff in the same effect, which is absolutely insane, does come at a hefty cost of minusing yourself 4 Dom. And so typically you kind of want to save this till the late game. And typically with Zephyr, if you are finding yourself in the late game, you survive the early game, you're usually in a pretty good place to take out the win. It is not the most competitive deck, but definitely a lot of fun. Really good matchup into things like your Whitebeard, your greens, your blues. Does really well into those. It does struggle with boards that have early aggression, so things like your Zoro or your Luffy's, or things that like to go really wide really quickly like your Zoros, and then does struggle a bit against the black decks where you can't remove things because of them being immune to removal effects. So those you do struggle with, but everything else you usually have a pretty good time, especially if you make it into the late game. And going back to the effect of Zephyr here, usually I'm only triggering that once I've played a Kuzan or two, that really late game, get some good removal going on there. But as you see, we've got plenty of other removal options before we need to use this effect. So as we just mentioned, Zephyr's effect is all about killing stuff with cost of 3 or less. There's a bunch of other cards that help with removal, but we're first going to talk about the cards that help reduce play cost. First of all, we have one of the 19 2k counters that we run in the deck, Suru. 2k counter, 1 cost, 0 power. On play, give one of your opponent's characters -2 cost during the turn. Next up, we are running 4 of the Tashigi, 3 cost, 4,000 power, 2,000 counter. Another lot of those big 2k counters that we have. And then activate main, you may rest this character, give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 during the turn. So both of them providing that -2 cost effect. The Tsuru is the on play, the Shigi is the activate main, so you can get this off multiple turns if she does survive. And the final cost reduction card that we are running 4 of the super rare Kuzan. So 4 cost, 5,000 power, no counter. On play, you could draw one, which is super nice to keep your hand nice and full of resources. And then when attacking, you can give up to one of your opponent's characters -4 cost during the turn. So with Kuzan, anything that's a 7 cost puts within killing range for Zephyr. And then you have some of these, you're stacking that up to 9, 10, you're basically taking out anything with the Zephyr if you need to. But there, as I said, a bunch of other removal effect cards, which we'll talk about now. Starting us off with the other removal cards that we have at our disposal, we have 3 Monkey D. Garp, the rare from set 2. 2 cost, 3,000 power, 2,000 counter, so another lot of those 2,000 counters. Just running the 3. The effect is Don ×2 when attacking, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 0. So that in combination with the Kuzan we spoke about before, anything with a 4 cost is going to be wiped out here. If you have the big secret rare Kuzan out, you're going to get multiple things killed with the Garp, especially if you get multiple out, which is very common in this deck. The next removal card we are running 3 Kobe from set 2, 3 cost, 4,000 power, 1,000 counter. On play, trash a card from your hand, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. So this one just a once off that we can get this effect of. It does come at the cost of trashing something from your hand, so just be mindful of that. Generally, I am trashing other removal cards or cost reducing cards that don't have counters with Kobe, because generally I'm trying to prioritize having the protection. And we're running 4 of all those other things, so you're likely going to have one in play before you activate this effect, or you're going to have a few in hand, so you're not too worried about doing some discarding of those. Speaking of those big bodies that remove and don't have counters, the first one that we're running a full playset of the Sakazuki. So 6 cost, 7,000 power, no counter. On play, trash a card from your hand, KO up to one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 5 or less. So that's taking out pretty much any blocker that we have except for the kids, but in combination with your Kuzan, you're pretty much taking almost anything out, which is absolutely amazing. And Sakazuki is really good into like Whitebeard. You're removing those bigger bodies that like to play on curve, things like the Rush Luffy. Using a Tsuru, you can take out the aces, quite easily take out Whitebeards with your Kuzan in combination with your Sakazuki as well. The next removal card that we're running is actually a purple removal card. We are running just 2 of the King from set 1. So 7 cost, 7,000 power, no counter. On play, Don -2, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less, and one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. So getting multiple kills off there. And this is really good if you pair it with the secret rare Kuzan. So you play the secret rare Kuzan, then you play this the next turn. You're taking out some fairly big boys with this effect. And King is really good into matchups like Law or Zoro that like to go wide with smaller bodies. And really great against any deck that likes to run winny little blockers as well, so you can quite easily remove them. And the Dom minusing effect is a lot nicer, I guess, long term for us rather than the trashing from hand effect. Because once again, the biggest downfall when it comes to like a black deck is just managing your resources. Always need to trash something to remove something. Can bite you in the bum if you don't manage your cards and resources well. The final removal card that we are running 4 of the secret rare Kuzan. So as I said before, we can get multiple of these guys out. So 10 cost, 10,000 power. Your turn, all of your opponent's characters gain -5 cost. And then on play, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 0. So that cost reduction effect does happen before the KOing effect. So you can play that out and KO something with a cost of 5, or original cost of 5 or less. So generally you're kind of controlling board, removing things, applying some pressure until you get to your 10 Don, playing out a Kuzan. By that time you'll probably have another one in your hand. Next turn you're going to play another one. Everything's going to be sitting on 0 play cost if you have 2 of them out. And you can quite easily remove things with Zephyr, with Garp, with all those other removal cards we've just spoken about as well. So you can be very, very controlly, and the 10k bodies, it's hard to deal with when you establish them. Alright, moving on to the more defensive options for the deck. Because as I said, we want to try and survive to the late game. So early game, we're kind of setting up a lot of protection, which can be achieved with these cards that I'm about to show you here. The first that we are running 4 of the Barcelino. So the 4 cost 5,000 power, 1,000 counter. Opponent's turn, this character gains 1,000 power and cannot be KO'd by effect. So always a 6k blocker, always immune on our opponent's turn. Just be careful on your turn, can still be killed by effects. So if you're swinging in a red life, Jet Pistol is going to take you out. So just be mindful of that. And it is a blocker. So usually on curve, I usually try to go second with Zephyr. So turn 2, you're either playing one of the Barcelinos or the 4-drop Kuzan. It's a very common play right there. The next form of protection, next blocker that we're running 4 of the starter deck Queen. So 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter. On play, Don -1, draw 2 cards, and then trash 1 card from your hand. Really good for hand resource, but just be mindful of that Don -1 effect. Because you do want to try and get to your 10 drop Kuzan as quick as you can. So just be mindful, depending on your matchup, you may need to play out a few queens and use that effect. You don't have to use that effect as well. Just be mindful. You don't have to trigger that to draw 2, trash 1. But generally it's pretty good to make sure you have your 2k counters or your defensive event cards in your hand. Speaking of the events, we'll go over them now, the defensive ones that we've got. We're running a full playset of Shockwave. This is a 2 cost counter. Up to one of your leader or character cards gains 4,000 power during the battle. Insane already. Then the next part is also a nice removal effect. Then KO up to one of your opponent's active characters with a cost of 3 or less. So if your opponent's not smart, playing out a character, attack at you, you got the 2 Don active, you've used your shockwave, you're killing the character as long as it's a cost of 3 or less. Really good at removing blockers or cards with removal effects like your Robins or your Garps. The trigger effect is also really nice. KO up to one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 4 or less, regardless if it's arrested or not. The final defensive event card that we are running, just 2 of it, is Judgment of Hell. So 2 cost, counter, Don -1, give up to a total of 2 of your opponent's leader or character cards minus 3000 power during the turn. So you're essentially blocking 2 swings for 2 Don, which is absolutely wild and does come in clutch a lot of the times. I am tempted to maybe bump this up to 3, maybe dropping 1 of the shockwaves, but the removal effect from the shockwave is just too good to not have. The trigger for Judgment is if your opponent has 6 or more Don cards on the field, your opponent returns 1 Don card from their field to their Don deck. So it can be quite nice, say if you're going against a deck that really relies on their curve, late game, especially something like the red decks where they're trying to get their new gates out. You can delay the new gate by turn, which can come in quite clutch, which is nice. But otherwise it's mainly used that for that main counter effect, because stopping 2 attacks is always lovely. Alright, so round out the deck profile, we've got 8 cards left, 2 play sets, and these are, I guess, more the tech cards, and they're basically 2k counters with a bit of spice that we can not always use, but some matchups, some situations are really good to have them. The first is a Sasuke. So 3 cost, 4000 power, 2000 counter. Don ×1, when attacking, you may trash 1 card from your hand, add up to 1 Don card from your Don deck, and rest it. So really good way to ramp up your Don again after you use something like your Zephyr's effect or your King's effect, but it does come at the cost of minusing a card from your hand. Another option you can use for this but doesn't have a counter is the OP1 ulti. So it's a 2 cost on play rest a Don to bring out another Don rested. There are some lists that are running that, but I do find that I value the 2k counter a lot more, because I said we need to survive to that late game, and usually then we're in a pretty good position. The final 4 cards that we are running in the deck, we are running 4 X Drake, the OP1 X Drake. So 5 cost, 5000 power, 2000 counter. On play you can Don -1, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. Really good late game to play this. If you're trying to math out how much counter and stuff your opponent has, you can easily just knock out one of those counters by playing X Drake. And is that Don -1 effect, as I said before, you just got to be careful when managing your Don, but usually you're only playing this late game, so you're not too concerned about the amount of Don you have available to you. Otherwise it's always used as a 2k counter. Alright guys, there's the deck in all of its glory. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Let us know in the comment section below what you think of the deck. Have you guys played it before? Are you going to try it out? If you do, let us know how it goes. Let us know what tweaks, changes you would make. But again, thank you for checking out the video. Stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.